Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Best of Pedalshift. On this edition, we're going back to, let's see here, January of 2017, talking about basic skills you should have before going on bike tour. I think this is a good evergreen kind of episode, regardless of the time of year, but we cover all sorts of things on this episode that I think that it is best for any bike tourist to have. Skills like how to change a flat, understanding your spokes, and a few other things as well. As always, you can check out the show notes for all of these episodes in their original form, and this, of course, will be at pedalshift.net/068. Hope you enjoy. Basic skills you should have before going on bike tour. Now, as many of you know, if you've been listening to the show for a while, I am kind of resistant to the concept of you must do this and there's only one way to do that. I find that prescription is a fallacy. It's wrong. It's not the right way to approach things. I think bicycle touring is so many things to so many different people. Some people insist on lots of gear and doing things in a specialized way. Other people just grab the first bike and just go. And I think that there are those that don't want to do any camping. There are people that insist on camping. There are people that say no technology. There are people that say do technology. I say you ride your ride. That's the number one thing. However, as I said, I think that there are some skills that you should have if you are going on any kind of a multi-day bicycle tour. I think that you would be best served to understand the following things before you take off, because I think it will mean less risk, a better ride, and more fun overall. So let's kick it off right here. First off, know how to repair a flat. I think that you don't necessarily need to do any of these things, but I think this is about as close to a must as you could possibly get. When you're on the road, it's likely that you're going to be in a spot that is going to be without people coming by you, and without being able to get others to help you. Maybe you're going to be in places where it won't be that hard or won't be that difficult. But I think that the self-sufficiency of dealing with a puncture is something that I think is a really important thing to be able to have in your arsenal of tools. One of the best places to start to learn if you don't know how, there's 1,000,001 YouTube videos. Just, throw it in the search, bike fix a flat, bike flat, anything like that. There are all sorts of different methods and ways to do it. I don't think that there is any one good way to do it. There's some people that like to leave the tire on and pull out the tube and have all sorts of fancy ways, and they insist that that way is the best. The best way is whatever works for you. There are some people that insist on making sure that you patch a tube. There are others that say that's not worth the time, the effort, the money, whatever. Whatever is your best way to do it, learn how to do it. Another place that is a really helpful thing is your local bicycle shop, and they often will have how-to sessions. In fact, I think if there is one class that LBS's, local bicycle shop, if you ever hear me say that, tend to have the most of, even if they only do this one thing, it's how to fix a flat. Check it out at your local shop. Almost assuredly will have regular classes that do that. And if not, maybe you can actually kind of talk to a mechanic and they can tell you about their favorite way, or even the salesperson, or maybe that's the same person, depends on the size of your shop. The other place that you might be able to find a way to learn how to repair a flat is through a local bicycle co-op. So these are generally going to be nonprofits that are focused on helping you understand bike skills and things along those lines. So I would encourage you to check those out. That's a good source of information, your local bicycle shop and a local bike co-op, for any of these types of things. And frankly, I think it would be good for you, if you're new to bike touring, to find these types of places in your community no matter what. Whether you are an experienced rider or not, these are good resources to have, and certainly a place where you can learn how to repair a flat. Number two, understanding your spokes. Now, note that I'm not saying you should you have to know how to true your wheel or anything like that. And if you're brand new to bicycling, you may not even know what the hell I'm talking about. Basically, you need to understand how your spokes work and how wheels work, I think. Let me back up to the real basic stuff. spokes are really necessary. I mean, that probably should go without saying. They wouldn't be there if they weren't. What they do is they create equal tension across a wheel to maintain that wonderful, perfectly round shape. And what you get if you lose some tension and you lose that balance, and the balance is the real key, the wheel, it loses its true. And so you'll hear this, your wheel is out of true, or things along those lines. When your wheel is out of true, it wobbles. That's the best way to explain that. So understanding how your spokes work can help you figure out how to fix such a thing if it happens while you're riding. And I'm here to tell you that this is something that's pretty common on a fully loaded tour, because the spokes get so much battering basically by the heavier loads. Now, if you've got a good, properly set up touring bike with good touring wheels, well, you're going to have lots of extra spokes on there, and they're going to be burlier, better spokes. If you're riding something that maybe wasn't designed for touring in the first place, this is going to be one of the places where you're going to find things start to fail over time. So, understanding your spokes, basically, you want to make sure that they are equally balanced across the way. So if you are finding that one of your wheel is starting to get out of true, you're noticing a wobble, and the way that you'll notice that really quickly is you'll start to hear a rub or feel a rub on your rim brakes if you've got rim brakes. And that usually means that you want to go and check all the spokes. A lot of the time, what you'll find is you'll find one or two looser spokes compared to what's on the opposite side. So a tool that I always recommend you carry is a spoke tensioner. And they come in a variety of different things, but basically it's sort of like a mini wrench. If you look at the nipples, they have edges on them, sort of like a nut, for lack of a better way of putting it. And a spoke tensioner allows you to rotate them around, to tighten them or loosen them. One thing that you want to not do is fiddle around too much with your spokes if you don't know what you're doing. However, if you're noticing that your wheel is starting to get a little out of true and you're riding, and you've got a spoke tensioner and you can tighten it up so it's at roughly the same tension as the one opposite to it, that is going to make your life a lot easier. You're going to extend the range for that wheel. There is going to come a point where you're probably going to want to take your wheel in to get properly tensioned and properly trued at a bike shop down the line, especially if you're on a really long ride. But this is something that you can do while you're riding and really stop something kind of bad from happening. Busting spokes, that starts the clock really ticking for how much longer you can ride on a particular wheel. And if you go for too long, your wheel may go out of true, I'll call it permanently. You can always kind of re-true a wheel, but if you let it go for too long, it becomes really difficult to keep it true afterwards. So you always want to be sort of on top of what's going on with your wheel. And that's why I always recommend having a spoke tensioner with you along any kind of a tour. So understanding your spokes, I think that's something that you should understand before you go on tour. Number 3, this one's a real important one, and it's key to safety, and that is brake adjustment. You should know how to adjust pad placement for rim brakes, how to adjust the tension on your calipers for rim brakes, and if you're a disc brake person, you need to understand how it works in the first instance and how to replace a disc brake pad, how to handle a bent disc, those types of things. You also probably want to be aware of what happens when you're riding a disc brake, for instance, because those discs tend to heat up. And although I don't actually have any bikes that have disc brakes, I'm pretty aware of how they work and how they can, in a lengthy downhill, or if you're having to ride it to handle, say, curves or something along those lines, you'll want to kind of be able to squirt that disc every once in a while with some water to stop it from really heating up too hot, because if it does get too hot, then you're in real trouble. For rim brakes, that tends not to be quite the same issue, although I have heard people doing that just to keep things safe. I use a particular brand of pads called Cool Stops, and I've never had an issue with that. And I've come down some pretty gnarly hills where I've been having to brake quite a bit. So I haven't had that much of a problem. Generally speaking, brakes are not that difficult to learn sort of on the fly. What I found when I was sort of first getting into bicycling as an adult was that That was the area where I got the most frustrated, though, because it seems like it should be really simple and easy. And I found that I could never figure out how to do the adjustments. And these were with rim brakes. And so I guess the best way to put it for those of you who are new is just keep trying, keep trial and error. I found that over time, my experience sort of got to the point where I could adjust rim brakes pretty easily, but it took a lot of trial and error just to sort of understand how it sits on there. The other thing, and this goes back to understanding your spokes, sometimes the reason why things are screwed up is because your wheel's out of true. And that's something that's really easy to just take a look at. Pick up the rear end of your bike or your front end, depending on which wheel is the issue, and spin it. And if you're seeing wobble, well, your wheel's out of true, and that's going to make it even harder to deal with in terms of brake adjustment. So those are the types of things that are a real safety concern, because obviously brakes are a real safety feature on a bike. I think I'm kind of going out on a limb on that one, but brake adjustment, that's something that I think that you should know before you go out on tour. Last but not least, saddle adjustment. This is a tricky one, but I do think that because so many tours begin and end with, or I should say end because of discomfort in the saddle, this is something that you want to get to know a little bit. So let me talk about a couple of things. Generally speaking, although you can really, torque around a saddle and you can make the nose really tall or really drop, generally speaking, for most people, and of course, let me set aside if you get a fitting, because if you get a professional fitting, they're going to actually really look at things differently. If you're doing it yourself, not getting a fitting, your saddle should probably be relatively flat. That's the place where you have the most comfort generally. You also want the saddle to be set back a little bit from probably what you've normally done if you're just sort of casually biking around, so that you're making sure that when you pedal, you're pedaling straight down. And that will often take care of a variety of different issues. Sometimes you will need to get a more professional fitting, or you'll want to have a bike mechanic to at least take a look at how you sit on the bike. For a lot of people, they find they get pains in the wrist, and that's going to depend. Do you have drop bars? Do you have flat bars? Do you have a mustache style bar like I've got? It really depends on your own geometry pretty much. You may need to make adjustments overall to your bike, not so much to your saddle. You may need to raise those handlebars a bit if you're having pain in your wrists, because you may be leaning too hard on them. You shouldn't have to be supporting a lot of your body weight that way. Now, when it comes to the saddle, the one thing that I find most in touring, whether it's people writing in or discussions or people I've talked to on the road, is that knee pain can be a real problem for folks. Of course, you can remember back when I had discussions with Mysterious James on his very first long tour, he actually was thinking about quitting at one point because the knee pain was so bad. And what we found kind of pretty quickly was saddle height is the real kind of magic in all of that. If your saddle is a little bit too high or a little bit too low, that can cause some really debilitating knee pain over the course of 20, 40, 60 miles in a given day. And you do that day after day, you're really going to create some problems, and it's going to get to the point where you can't ride anymore. That's what his problem was. Well, when we found out that all we needed to do was raise the saddle about maybe a millimeter or two, lo and behold, the knee pain went away. Now, I'm not saying that all knee pain is caused by saddle height, but I will say a lot of it is. And so making sure that you can eliminate that if you're feeling pain in the knees is a really important thing. So understand how you can adjust your saddle, both from the tilting aspect, and again, you should probably be pretty flat, and then more importantly, the up and down. And often that's going to be on a quick release. And when you find that magical spot where you're feeling comfortable, you can go for a while, you're not getting numb in parts, you're not getting knee pain, make sure you mark that spot with a Sharpie, because that's not going to change too much over time. And I find that that's a really important thing to do, because very frequently you're going to find that over time, no matter how well torqued down that quick release is for a saddle, or even if it's not a quick release, you may find that it over time it dips that extra millimeter just from your weight on it over time. So you'll want to make sure that if you're going, things aren't as comfortable, what's going on? Well, look at it. Has it dipped below your mark? Well, then bring it back up again. And then I think you'll probably find things are good. That's a tip that I really recommend, especially for early adopters to bicycle touring. But it's something that a lot of folks who've been touring for a long time haven't done, don't do, and find that can be really helpful as well. So saddle adjustment, that's the fourth of the things that I recommend that all bicycle tourists know how to do. So I'm going to go back and go through the list again. Know how to repair a flat. Number 2, understand your spokes. Number 3, know how to adjust your brakes. And number 4, understand saddle adjustment. Know what you're doing with all of that. Those are the things that I think will make your bike touring a lot easier and a lot better. They're relatively simple to learn. Most of those things you can learn off of YouTube videos. Dopey podcasts like this, or even at your local bike shop or in a bike co-op. Those are great places to learn stuff like that. And I recommend that you understand all of those things before you go off on your first bike tour. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.